movie! Un movie de minions con monstras!
Minions and Monsters. Ever since they momentarily split from Gru to star in their own feature, the success that the Minions gathered with their spin-off has become so big that they now officially have their own trilogy. But when it comes to their third film, however, they're not moving forward to get closer to the main timeline of Despicable Me. They're going even further back to make this the prequel to the prequel, taking us to the 1920s when the Minions had an artistic phase when their craftsmanship was put onto making movies instead of gadgets for evil masterminds. Now, I will be the first to admit that I actually enjoy all of the main Despicable Me films. Even with the fourth one, while not the best in the franchise, it was surprisingly entertaining that gave me some good laughs along the way. However, I don't think I could say the same about the Minions movies. They're not terrible, and I wouldn't even say that they're full-on bad, but while they can have some funny standout moments in the Despicable Me films, I believe the Minions cannot carry a whole picture by themselves compared to when Gru and his family take the lead. Sure, the way that they can be box office record breakers is admirable, but I still find that the first is among Illumination's weakest films, while The Rise of Gru feels like the kind of feature you'd exactly expect from the Minions by being more about delivering hyperactive gags than to tell a story. But when it comes to Minions and Monsters, I do get the concept of how adding monsters could spice up the familiar formula here, but if that's actually the case to help brighten up my mood with these films, well, answering that question is going to be the point of this review. So now that the lights and cameras are set for the Minions' next movie, will they finally achieve cinema? Or did they end up summoning a monster? Let's find out. The story. It's worth noting that ever since it was revealed that the movie's setting is in Hollywood during the Roaring '20s, fans have argued that this messed up with the Minions lore that they established in the first, where after they literally blasted off Napoleon, they went hiding in a cave for about a century and a half until Kevin, Bob, and Stuart decided to go out and find their new boss during the 1960s. Some may interpret this as careless from Illumination to go and rewrite the Minions' history, but in my opinion, this is technically the 7th Despicable Me movie and the 3rd feature from its prequel spinoff. I think worrying about the consistency of the franchise's own lore by that point is among the least of its issues. Besides, we did gain one benefit to its new twist on its history. The question of where were the Minions during World War II is back on the menu!
Toot toot!
But back to Minions and Monsters. The story of this movie is how the Minions' pursuit for a new evil boss led them to become film stars during the dawn of cinema. But after they failed to adapt to sound, one of these Minions, James, got an idea to get their fame back, which is to create a monster movie. And with the help of his friends, Henry and Ed, along with a Cthulhu-like creature named Goomy, their monster hunt becomes a lot bigger than what James envisioned for his feature.
So you need monsters for your movie!
Interestingly enough, as a Minions movie, this is the most story-driven, where the plot takes more importance compared to the first and second. Yes, comedy is still essential here, but it does try to present more than the Minions' typical silliness with the pursuit of an artist who uses craft in order to find public appreciation and help his friends have a better purpose in life than serving the evilest person they come across. And yet, just like the other Minions movies, the story itself is among its weakest assets. Even if it puts in more effort to make the narrative an important factor to the experience, I find that it still feels dull where it flows like what you'd expect out of a typical kids film. Most of its arcs and events are just cliches where it leaves no surprises to what will happen next. In a way, the plot is about the same as the first Minions and The Rise of Gru, except you switch the timeline to the 1920s and the themes to classic Hollywood and monsters.
What are you going to use for your monster?
Aha.
Not to mention that the monsters component doesn't fully show up until around the third act when Goomy reunites with his old friends, and the feature also has a side plot with this self-proclaimed alien robot named Dort that doesn't connect much to the main story other than to show what the other minions outside of the main three are up to. As much as it may try to be a little different, the story reminds us that this is still a Minions movie, and it is still what you'd expect out of one.
Oh, Chris!
But there is one thing that does salvage it to make it at least a little more than just watchable. As a movie set in 1920s Hollywood, Minions and Monsters also acts as a tribute to classic cinema, featuring numerous of throwbacks to not just some of the first movies, but also the first stars and its style of comedy. Considering that the Minions are already physical comedians who don't speak in a way that's comprehensive, they fit perfectly in their new environment that strengthens both the tribute aspect and the humor, where they bring back that old style of comedy. Part of the fun of watching the feature is to see how the Minions add their own twist to these classic moments and how they try to adapt to early movie history, which can be surprisingly clever by Minion standards and make their comedy feel fresh and funny again.
Piñata, carbonara, lasagna. What?
I'd also like to add that this is one of the very rare Illumination movies where they have virtually no pop songs. Even the score by John Powell is fully dedicated to immerse audiences into its 1920 setting, and it complements very well to the picture. The story itself may be what you'd expect from a Minions movie, where it lacks originality and even a good flow, but its homage to classic cinema is what elevates it a bit to retain some enjoyability with some fun throwbacks and good humor that can deliver a surprising amount of funny moments. Seriously, even I laughed more than I expected here. It's definitely not its best element, but I'll give the story a 6 out of 10. You can't expect anything compelling out of the Minions, but I can't deny that this one does have heart for the classics. The animation. Just like with the Super Mario Galaxy movie a few months prior, regardless of how you may feel about the studio itself, you know that at least the animation will deliver, and Minions and Monsters did quite well with the materials it had. Sure, maybe it won't impress the most snobbish of animation fans, since there are still elements that remain the same as a Minions movie. The designs originated by Eric Guillon still remains to craft the characters, and I won't say that it always feels like you're in the early days of Hollywood. The most that I could say as a criticism with the visuals is that it still looks like an Illumination movie, and this may not be for you if you're looking for something that's drastically different with its style. But again, maybe it doesn't have the freshest materials, but I can't say that it fails to find a way to make it visually fun. In fact, at the start, the movie goes deeper into the Yellow Creature's history by presenting more variety of villains that they once served before their shenanigans took their masters' lives.
Oh,
but once they made it to Los Angeles, that's when Illumination's vision of old Hollywood comes to life. And as a movie fan, there are scenes where they can be unironically stunning to watch. With its 1920 setting, the backgrounds prominently use the Art Deco style to decorate Hollywood's early luxury and make the studio, Bright Brothers Pictures, feel grand with its own set of decor to have it look like a movie-making paradise. But where the Minions make the best use of its classic cinema tribute is with the animation. Again, these characters are all about physical comedy, and I don't just mean the kind you'd regularly find in cartoons, but also the ones in silent films. There are many moments that play in the humor where the film recreates scenes from Hollywood's golden era, like the works of Charlie Chaplin, Orson Welles, Harold Lloyd, Buster Keaton, and more to add a little Minion twist. In fact, the movie literally begins with the Minions invading the first films in history. Even when they're not direct references to something, that classic cinema theme is still strong as it captures every detail of what goes into old-style filmmaking. Even having times when it's like the feature takes you on a tour to show how movies were made in the past, along with some shots where it's as if they were filmed the old-fashioned way to show how Minions and silent-era pictures are a surprisingly good mix.
Oh, Humphrey. My mother warned me about men like you.
But if I have to pick my favorite moment in the movie, it would have to be the climax. Listen, I understand if some feel like there isn't enough monsters in a movie called Minions and Monsters, but once they summon Irene, that's when it turns into the real monster flick that it wished to be. The movie becomes absolutely chaotic, where the pace becomes faster, the effects go all out with this giant blob monster rampaging over Los Angeles, the action brings the characters all over the place, the Minions' antics get more loony, and whatever logic was left in the picture gets thrown out the window where it leaves you to expect the unexpected. In a way, the movie is quite self-aware that its whole premise makes no sense, where the Minions want to make a movie during the dawn of Hollywood, and monsters are somehow involved. This is where it ultimately unleashes itself and says screw it to throw everything it has to see what happens. However, this ultimately reveals when the Minions can be at their best. The crazier and more nonsensical the scenes can be, the more they can be unpredictable and funny with whatever they pull out. Even if the movie itself isn't great, that climax elevated my experience to make me come out feeling like it was worth watching. Yes, a lot of it is the typical Illumination animation, but it's in the detail how the team brought classic Hollywood back to life with the help of their signature characters that makes the visual craftsmanship impressive. From recreating old movie sets in action, to the many homages of the films from that era, to the monsters coming out to make an epic finale, and all the different creative ideas they released in between, Minions and Monsters highlight why movies, both old and new, are fun to watch. That's why I'll be giving the animation a 9 out of 10. I don't think many people will call the Minions cinema, but their third movie certainly looks like it. The characters. Admittedly, if we are talking about Minions and Monsters as a movie, I wouldn't say that they are greatly written characters. In general, with arguably a minion or two as an exception, they all come out flat with not much depth or an arc to them. Who they are is pretty much what you get in the cast, and their roles are made for their one purpose. But while that may not be their most memorable asset, what they do have to make things up is great voice acting. Of course, director Pierre Coffin is always ready to voice the Legion of Minions, but then you also have people like Christoph Waltz, Jesse Eisenberg, Zoe Deutsch, Jeff Bridges, Trey Parker, and more, who all sound like they were having so much fun with their performances, which helped to brighten the personalities and in return, make them enjoyable. Even when they didn't receive the best materials, the actors made the most out of them to make their characters stand out.
I'm so sorry about earlier. So, I would like to work with you. We should make movies.
As we look into the stars themselves, we begin with the film's leading minion, James. Unlike the other minions who are always looking for their next boss, James is a more creative type who prefers to sketch, paint, and tell stories. When he discovers movies, he found his calling where his talent can be greatly appreciated, and will do whatever it takes to remain as Hollywood's next great filmmaker, even if it can get him and the world into trouble. It's funny how, over the years with all these Despicable Me and Minions movies, James is the minion that I find has the most of his own personality.
Starta aquí con el clavo. ¡El monstruale arrivo! ¡La destructa la terra! ¡Oh! area.
Sure, he could be described as the typical outcast where his quirkiness can have mixed results of either screwing everything up or making things that work out great for everyone. But there was effort to make him more than what you'd expect out of the minions by giving him his own interests instead of just serving the comedy. As a creative person, I find myself connecting with James because it's honestly nice to see a movie where the protagonist is a creative person who's driven by his passion for the arts and pulls it off in a genuine and a bit of a heartfelt way. It's not every day that an animated film gets a lead like that. Then again, it's also kind of weird to admit that I personally connected with a minion. I did not come into this year thinking that I'd make that kind of confession.
Oh la la. Benissimo, James.
And along his side are Henry, a more mischievous minion who became friends with James for not following the minion status quo, and Ed, another minion who is hard of hearing that speaks in sign language and collects everything to make sure they got what they need for any situation. Which I gotta say is pretty cool of Illumination to be more inclusive and have some disability representation. Again, funny how this is coming from a minion, but it does help to show more sides of these characters and how they could be more relatable.
Ed. Asante.
And then there is Dick, who is aptly named because of how strict and short-tempered he is with making sure that all the minions are in line for the mission of finding their next evil overlord to serve. Which you can imagine how he can have a hard time dealing with James and Henry.
Minions don't make movies. Oops. Scusate, Greg.
As for the non-minions, there's Max, the director who's like James's caring movie mentor, Dort, the retro robot that some of the minions follow as their new boss, only to be sidetracked when falling in love with a suffragette, the Bright brothers who lead the big studio with opposite personalities, and Goomy, the little monster who aids James to make his movie, but has his own plans when he reunited with his old friends. At the risk of putting out a minor spoiler, Goomy is the film's main antagonist. I mean, to be fair, the Deceiver is literally in his name.
I'm Gary Orcam Oliver Magma Ichabod the Deceiver, but my friends just call me Goomy for short.
But out of all the characters here, I find that he is the weakest because he only shows up by the second half, and from there, he rushes his way to being a kind of plot twist villain. It's not necessarily Goomy himself that's the problem, but it would have helped if he appeared earlier so that we can have more time to be familiar with him. Not to mention that it would have also helped to emphasize how this is called Minions and Monsters.
No le pica monstra. What? Oh, shit. Hey, teeny tiny baby! Stop manhandling me, you big weirdo! Whoa.
On their own, they're not the most captivating cast, and some lean more towards being basic or not fully handled well, but by the standards of a Minions movie, there was more effort to strengthen the personalities so that they could carry the heart of the film and make it more likely to connect with them, whether it be emotionally or because they can make us laugh, along with solid voice acting that makes their roles more memorable. It won't get the highest score, but I'm giving the characters a 7 out of 10. Just like the Minions themselves, they won't get everything right, but they have enough heart to work together in order to make this a fun film. Out of all the Despicable Me spin-offs, the third one earned the title of the best Minions movie. I know the bar was never high to achieve that in the first place, but it's still a noteworthy accomplishment in its own right. Minions and Monsters is a surprisingly fun animated feature that not only elevates the Minions formula to make itself more chaotic and entertaining, but it's also Illumination's loving tribute to classic cinema. Sure, there are those faults that you'd expect from a Minions movie where the writing made the story and the characters themselves a bit weak, but it also does a lot more right to become entirely enjoyable thanks to the admirably crafted homage to the golden age of Hollywood, comedy that hits more than it misses, strong animation, a cast with a lot of heart, great voice acting, and a wild finale that will have you come out smiling. It goes without question that if you've been enjoying the Minions movie so far, you'll have a great time with this. But I'd also like to add that if you're a fan of old movies and classic films, I recommend to check this out. You may be surprised how the Minions' love letter to that era is actually quite nice, and their antics can make that century-old style of comedy feel fresh again. And if you enjoy my talk on the Minions making their movie, then give this review a like and come subscribe to my channel. You can also join my Patreon where you can support my work and get rewards that can make you feel like a Hollywood star, like seeing my videos before anyone else. I'm sure it'll be debatable if we can call this cinema, but for a feature made by the Minions, I gotta give it to them that they made some real movie magic with this.
James, you have a real gift for filmmaking.